Good afternoon and Happy New Year to everyone. It is the first meeting of 2020 and I get to talk. I'm going to be like Ricky Gervais. I don't know what I'm going to say, but can you bleep me? Or actually, I have the pleasure of bringing in a new group, and this is the Committee of the Whole. And to designate yourselves, you need to elect a chairperson and a vice chairperson. And the rules as established in our policy, we do this openly. The way we do this, I'm going to open the floor for nominations. You can self-nominate. We do not require a second for a nomination. And you can vote for yourself. If more than two we still require 4 votes. If someone does not get 4 votes, the lowest person would drop out and we would have another ballot. And again, it doesn't require a second. We'll do the same procedure for vice chair. I will also ask the person if they're nominated, if elected, are they willing to serve. Some board members, for time reasons, may not be able to. So I will open up for nominations for chair for 2020 Board of Education. Recognize Mr. Manson.
Council, I would like to nominate Vice Chairman Edgy for next year.
Well, the first thing I'll do is ask Mr. Edgy, if elected, are you willing to serve?
Yes, sir. I will.
Okay, well, we have 1 nomination on the floor. Are there any other nominations at this time? Sufficient time has expired, so
He timed that on.
we have a nomination on the floor, Mr. Halsey. The nomination is for Mr. Edgy. He's accepted if elected. And do we have, now that you're here, do we have anyone who would like to make a nomination?
No.
Hearing none, all those in favor of Marcus Edgy to be chair, please raise right or left hand, doesn't matter. He's elected unanimously, and I'll keep going because I don't get to talk but once a year. We're going to have the same procedure for vice chair. We can have more than 1. You can self-nominate. You can vote for yourself. And I'll ask that person, if they're elected, are they willing to serve? The floor is open. Nominations for the position of vice chair. Mr. Mansell.
Council, I'd like to nominate Miss Edie Sams for Vice Chairman.
You're nominating Ms. Sams?
Yes, sir.
And I will ask Ms. Sams, you've been nominated to be vice chair. If elected, are you willing to serve?
I am.
Thank you. Are there any further nominations for the position of vice chair? Hearing or seeing none, the floor is closed. All those in favor of Ms. Edie Sams to be vice chair for 2020, please signify by raising your right or left hand. Having unanimous, we have a vice chair. Now we play musical chairs because we're going to ask the chair to move over, and here comes the gavel. And Ms. Sams, if you would take
And take
the,
your computer. That's what he said.
What?
They're supposed to take their computers with them.
Oh, okay. That's out of my pay grade. I don't talk about computers. Ms. Sams, if you would move to the second seat, and Mr. Mansell, you're on your own where you going to sit.
I'll be out front.
And that concludes my business, and I hope you don't have to hear from me the rest of the year.
Thank you.
That's probably impossible.
Is that a promise?
Congratulations to both.
Thank you, Andy. I appreciate it. Well, I just want to say it will be an honor to serve with this board. We've got a great board, and I'm looking forward to this year, and I'm glad Ms. Sams is going to be sitting next to me. I guess we'll go ahead and jump right into this work session. First off is item number 3, a review and signing of the Board of Ethics policy document. I believe Ms. Liptrot has it there. It's a document that we sign every year. You see them up in the buildings. and on the walls, but we'll pass it around and have that signed by the board. And while we're doing that, I will turn it over to Dr. Cole for the items of information.
All right, thank you very much, Chairman Edgy. Our first item is our FY21 budget update. So this is sort of, I guess, the unofficial or official, I guess, kickoff of the budget season, and so we'll get started on that. Our first item, if you'd like to, would you like to do the presentation first? I guess we can do that first. All right, if you can get the lights, if you don't mind, Ms. Irrigan, or Dr. Irrigan. Go to the planning, the budget update, sorry, the one on the left.
No, that's mine.
That's all right, the one on the right, sorry. All right, there you go. Unless you've got the PowerPoint ready. You got the PowerPoint ready? Okay. And so this is just a PowerPoint we presented. It's not that long, but it just kind of lays out some of the parameters and priorities for this year's FY21 budget. And so me and Ms. Preston will kind of double team this as we go through. So if you can go to the first slide. Just a quick synopsis and a snapshot of our district. We have a little over 13,000 students, 13,287, which includes pre-K. Currently, we have 1,994.5 full-time and part-time employees, and this includes a little over 1,100 certified employees as a district. And I think we're still by far the largest employer, certainly of Glynn County. There are, of course, 16 public schools in Glynn County, 6 other programs which I've listed there. I won't go through that, and all of our schools are accredited by Advanced Ed, or now, as it's now known as Cognia. So the next slide.
So how are these schools funded? The general fund is our main account for operations. 56% of our expenditures are funded through local, that's your property taxes. 44% is state, your QBE money, which is driven from the student body and the services that they need on a daily basis. And less than 1% of money in the general fund is federal. The next slide shows our millage rate since 2014. As you see, we dipped down in the millage rate from 14 to 50 and kept it the same for the last 7 years. While their digest growth rates had a dip in 14, and we went up a little in 15 and back down in 16 and back up in 17, a little bit further in 18, and back down in 19 and back down in 20.
Next slide, Chris, please. This gives a snapshot of our central office expenditure. I think gives a good overview of kind of how we compare. We just picked some districts that are kind of about the same size. Out of that, I think there was 290 systems that reported. Some of those are charter. We were 156, which means one being the most, spending the most per pupil, 200 or so being the one that spends the least. So I think that speaks a lot that we're pretty frugal with our, what we're doing here as a central office and having a fairly lean staff here. All right, we've got, obviously we've had a little talk, and of course it's been reported in the paper about different lawsuits. So I think this is a good slide to kind of talk about our general fund balance and some of the challenges we face as a school district. Our beginning balance is back in July 21st is $15.5 million. If you remember, it actually was about $25 million. But because of the lawsuit, the way the audit worked, auditor wanted us to do is to apply that, because the lawsuit was really based on prior years, to apply that to retroactively to that time. So technically, our beginning balance as of July 1st was $15.5 million. And again, this is after the lawsuit payout, so it was a lot higher when we went through this in the summer. The projected ending balance, if you remember, our budget included about a $3 million deficit. So our projected ending balance would be about $12.7 million at the end of June 30th, 2020. One of the things we face, as we've talked about many times before over the years, is Senate Bill 46, which is the homestead exemption. And for this past fiscal year, it's cost this district about $6.6 million. Cumulatively, that's a little over, just a tad over $50 million over the last several years. And we all get it, but I think some of the rub has been some of the people that apply for that that are probably not really, shouldn't be doing that for the way it was, the spirit of it anyway. The big one, of course, lately was the tax assessor's lawsuit, which is the Scarlett Williams, and it was improperly applied based on the lawsuit. Of course, we weren't a part of this lawsuit. This was a lawsuit that was made against the county or the tax assessor's office. It's been going on apparently for years. We found out about a little over a year ago because we do, of course, benefit from taxes, and one of the biggest beneficiaries of that Our share was one of the biggest. I think the county's was about $7 million. Ours was a little over $10.5 million. Thankfully, we have done a very good job, I think, over the years of building our reserve to the point where we could pay that all at one time. Certainly was the biggest check I've ever signed. But it definitely, is not very fun and something we'll have to work around because we had built a reserve that really helped us through the rainy day that we had there. And we'll get through it, but that's what dropped us to the $15.5 million that we have now. Some areas that people don't maybe know about QBE. Thankfully, the state is now fully funding QBE the last couple of years, which was not the case for a long time during the recession. But a lot of that, even at fully funded rate, does not include Social Security, extracurricular or athletics, pre-K, retirement for non-TRS employees, substitutes, SROs, and then transportation and nurses are 81% unfunded, which means they're only funded up to about 19%. And then we've had some increases in our teacher retirement system over the last several years after following the recession, as well as the employee health costs for our classified employees, which the next couple of slides will speak to. So we'll go to the next slide.
So that just shows the history of the teacher's retirement rate, how it started climbing after 2012.
How much would you say that's difference for each employee over the last several $1 million for our
Oh
district?
gosh,
Yeah.
yes. But the good news is next fiscal year it's going down to 19.06, which will save us 1.5 million.
And if you went one more year below that in 11, I think it was like 9 something. So you can see it's really rapidly increased. Thankfully, we've seemingly hit the ceiling of that. But that's certainly been a huge strain on the budget over the years.
And then for the insurance, the certified, we used to pay a percentage of every certified person's state-based salary. And during the recession, they changed that to a flat dollar amount of $945. But the classified employees, we used to pay a per person per month amount. And it used to be $296. And then during the recession, it started climbing and climbing and climbing to where it's exactly the same as the certified. So we pay $945 a month for everyone who participates in our CIRCO.
All right. And our last slide here is just what we're looking at going into this budget for FY21. First of all, we want to obviously maximize revenue from our state QBE Act, making sure that we're coding our FTE, at the right way that we need to. Also, want to make sure we allocate at least 75% of the general fund to our schools. It's currently at 83%. Next, maintain a competitive compensation, extracurricular supplemental structure, which we've done a big thorough review, which we'll talk about as the months ahead about how we want to do that with our all of our extracurricular activities. To the extent possible, we need to try to get as close to a balanced budget, I think, this year. As y'all know, in the years past, we've kind of had this number around 18 to 20 million, maybe a little bit more, obviously. And we kind of had a budget deficit of $2 or $3 million. But through very conservative budgeting, we end up not really spending all that and kind of coming back into the number we originally started with. So we've kind of played this back and forth, a little low, going back to that. But this year, I think we need to start going back above. So to get to that point, I think we need to make sure we're as close as we can to a balanced budget, so that next year, if we do conservatively budget, that money is going back in our reserve, so we start building that back up again. We need to move toward, which we've had the luxury of having for many years, back toward maintaining a 2 months fund balance, which is each year is about $10.5 million, so that's $21 million. We need to continue to have a transparent budget process, continue to demonstrate sustainability related to budget recommendations so that anything that we do this year, it's something that we can afford year after year. And while we don't know of anything from the governor's office or the legislature, we'd like to pass along any pay increase for all of our teachers, whether that's classroom or non-classroom. So that's just kind of a basic presentation about what we're looking at going into this fiscal year. And our next, I guess it's just one slide, is kind of a projection of kind of where we're at right now. It's very preliminary. It's going to change a lot, but at least we'll give you an idea as of January what that's looking like.
So, as you know, typically I start out with just a very brief summary at this time of year because there's not a lot of notes. Pretty much the only note we know is the decrease in the TRS rate, which I stated is going to save us $1.5 million. But I did 3 different scenarios, and honestly, the last 2 years we've adopted a budget that had an increase in the digest, and it came in lower. So I think in 2019, we adopted a budget with 3%, came in at 2.9, and last year we did 2.5%, came in at 1.79 in July. So we're just not gaining ground on our digest quick enough. So I showed you what it would look like if the digest, and I'm using 98% collection rate, which is higher than we've ever used. And even though it's coming in, 99, pushing 100% every year, so that's where some of our excess comes in that falls into the fund balance every year. But we're going to estimate to start the school year at 12.7, which again probably come in a little bit higher because of conservative budgeting and maybe some overages on the collection vault. But if the budget does spend exactly what we have budgeted and receive exactly what we have budgeted, then we would end up with 12.7 to start next year with. So a 2% increase in the digest at 98% collection rate would generate 1.4 million. I'm not at this time projecting any increase in the QBE money because the governor's not said anything about giving the teacher raises. And last year we thought it was just going to be a flat dollar amount per person, but it ended up being the weights in the formula were actually increased. So we actually came up to good last year. And but if he doesn't do anything, we have just a slight increase in our FTE average. But we also, our increases, even though our increases in our digest have been small, that hurts us on the QBE side because the local fair share means that we have to kick in more money. So I'm preliminary budget and just a decrease in QBE. And then the budget deficit that we assume from this year that goes forward to next year is 2.7 right now. If, we just did step increases for the certified and classified, that's about 1.5 million. And then the decrease in the TRS rate will save us 1.5. So with all that taken into consideration, with a 2% increase in the digest, we'd have a $1.8 million budget deficit. And with 10.8 million in fund balance. We currently run $10 million a month in salary benefits alone. It does not include utilities, gas, anything else. So a $21 million fund balance is a good conservative target.
Mama's back.
So then the next scenario shows a 3%
As long as we
increase.
heard it.
And the last one is 4%, but I just probably just cross that off. So, if I showed you these numbers and we had a 99% collection rate, you'd add about 700,000 or take off about 700,000 budget deficit for each scenario. But we've got to move towards gaining ground and not having budget deficits and looking at possible ways of saving money to get back to where we were.
Any questions about this? And I know, again, it's early and it's a little bit not exactly exciting, but I think it'll, hopefully we'll get through this. And again, we do a good job, I think, and we're going to take a look at everything we spend money on. And we've already spoken to our schools. We're not cutting anything, but we certainly want to be mindful of anything that they're spending, make sure it's something that's necessary as we move forward. All right, thank you, Ms. Preston. All right, our next item is, I think, the school calendar. And if you remember, at our last board meeting, we approved the 2021-2022 school calendar, which is in 2 years. Because everybody thought it was a great calendar. There was some discussion here at our board about potentially looking at next year's next year's calendar to make the same kind of, use that as a template for that based on the 2021-22 calendar. So I'll turn over to Dr. Whitehead, if you want to give some explanation about some of that, or I can, I guess I.
Yeah, either way, thank you. The calendar again mirrors what we recently approved for the following school year, to add in those built-in days for professional learning particularly, and the work days built around the 9-week marks, so that adjustments can be made in programming at the school level and allow teachers time to look at the data that's available at that point in time. So it also takes in the change to 178 school days for students, which then plays into those extra days for training and PL that are built in, that we wouldn't have to pull teachers out of the classroom and have subs in the rooms those days. So I don't know if there are any other particular questions. The same committee that convened to look at the following year's calendar was able to look at these, this proposal and give some feedback as well. But it's my understanding that if you're agreeable, we would put this out for comment, just like we did the calendar for the following school year.
This is almost identical, other than the dates being a little bit different as the one we just passed for 2 years from now. Obviously, we've already passed a calendar for 2020, 2021, but again, this would be a revision to that, a little bit of a tweak, again, following that same kind of template that we did for 2 years from now, and we would just follow the same format. We're going to put it out, if it's up to the board, for a month for any comments, and then we would potentially vote on this in February so that we can get that out to our families of that change for the following year. Any questions? Go
Was
ahead.
the split 85?
It was exactly,
93?
yes, sir.
I've just seen this for the first time. Just to note, teachers retiring have to retire before June 1st.
Right, right.
I have something. I was just going to say there were several principals and assistant principals that were part of the committee, and when the calendar for 2 years from now was approved, they got very positive feedback from the teachers. They enjoy the fact that we've built in PL and the planning days at the ends of the 4 terms. So that's why we thought it was a good idea to go ahead and start it this next year instead of having to wait until 2 years.
Thank you, Dr. Whitehead. Again, we'll put that on the table for public review and comment for the next month as well. All right, our next item is under Focus Area 2, Coherent Instructional System, and that's Dr. Whitehead can provide an update on some measures of academic progress.
So, yes, the Governor's Office of Student Achievement, right as we were heading into Christmas break, released information about the Beating the Odds. And you may recall that links back to our strategic waiver contract. And we can either meet contract goals by meeting a 3% gain annually by school, and or by the second look, which is beating the odds. And in the beating the odds analysis, they compare each school to other schools around the state with similar demographics and similar challenges to say, are they making gains that we would expect given all of those pieces and perspectives that come into play. And so the link that's there, you don't have to click right this minute, Chris, but it would allow you to go in and see the Governor's Office of Student Achievement page. And just to give you some additional information, it looks at enrollment numbers for the school. It looks at the percentage of students that have direct certification for socioeconomic status, which means that they get direct information from the Department of Human Services on students living in public housing, families that are receiving STAMP benefits, and those kinds of things that are playing directly certified. So it's not just based on a family's application for free and reduced lunch, it's actually direct certification through an agency. So it takes that percentage into place. And then the mobility rate for the school, which is an important factor where we have schools that have large amounts of turnover. It compares how they're doing with other schools that have that similar mobility rate. And then the typical kinds of subgroups that we would look at, which would be by ethnicity, students with disabilities, and English learners. Takes those factors into play compared to the CCRPI score for the school, and then determines if that school is either beating the odds, if it's within expected range for beating the odds, or if it is a school that is below expected gains for the school. And as a system, we had the majority of our schools beating the odds, which is in the summary that we have. So we have 13 of our schools, we're actually beating the odds. And if you look at that statistically compared to other districts around the state, we're extremely high to have that many schools that flat out are beating the odds. We had 2 schools that were within the expected range, which were Risley Middle School and Glynn Academy. And then our one school for last school year, remember this is lagging data, that was below expected outcomes was Needwood Middle School. And so just taking all these factors into play, we'll certainly share this with principals next week and talk about the different factors that went into review this. And a lot of these things are out of our control, and so that's a measure that kind of takes into consideration those things that we have no control over, as far as family mobility and the other pieces that come into play. And so, again, it was really, I think, some confirmation of the work that we've done through curriculum to provide consistency across our schools, moving away from that single curriculum choice by school, which we had some years ago. I think we're finally starting to recover from some of that, and the consistency that's been built in is now coming to play, because even though we have schools with lots of mobility, our students are still seeing success because they're moving from one school to the next, that they're having similar curriculum and they're having similar expectations. So I don't know if you had any other specific questions about the beating the odds information that came out.
Just to piggyback on that, I mean, there's some metrics we are like, this is not a really great metric, or, we feel it's unfair or whatever, but out of all the ones that you see, this is one you kind of go, it kind of makes sense, and is one that we should be proud of, I think, as a district, because comparing each school individually to like schools and saying that they are above the range of expected for that school, it says a lot that's going on in those schools. So have 13 of those out of the 16 and 2 kind of where they should be, and only one that's a little bit below. I think it says a lot about what's going on curriculum-wise, and a lot of hard work. So I just want to really commend the team here for that work. So.
And then the other piece that I added for you is that even though this is an external measure, just taking a moment to share with you again the literacy scorecard that we have in place that allows us an internal measure as we're going through the year. So again, as we try to always keep you up to date on things that we have in the strategic plan each time, our school status report allows us an opportunity to have those discussions with schools. The literacy scorecard shows you where students are in gains toward their Lexile levels that are expected by the end of the year, or their reading levels for the running records data that we have. Kindergarten is not collected for that beginning collection time frame, so they only have a mid-year at this point, but it shows you the percentage that are below expectations at the midpoint of the year, those that are on grade level, and the percentage that is above based on those. And this is reported out on instructional levels. So this allows our teachers to take the data that they receive on students and make instructional adjustments for that information. Again, our gains through Achieve 3000 implementation, we continue to see a direct correlation back to the ending point for our students on the milestones, and both with Achieve 3000 and the RI measure. The RI measure this time doesn't include specifically activities per week, because now we give the RI to every student in grades 3 through 8 in all elementary and middle, and because Brunswick High is part of the Striving Readers Grant, we give it in 9 through 11 at Brunswick High as well. So giving you those average Lexiles include more than students who are participating in Read 180. And so that just gives you a benchmark measure of where we are at this point in the year with those ways that we have to monitor literacy.
How long have we had the Read 180 program? 6 years? Was that so? But this was basically last year's data.
This is this year up
okay.
through December.
Okay.
This is August through December for this year.
And because what I'm looking at is the middle school. If you want to scroll up a little bit, you got grade 6, 938, target 997. We're getting closer. 1043 for 7, and then at 8th grade, 895 and the target's 1097. And what I'm looking at is the correlation about when did we start our reading initiative? 6 years ago. Those kids in 8th grade were in 2nd grade. And we started about then, and they were a little bit further behind then, and the 7th grade kids were in 1st grade. So it looks like to me our initiatives are working for those kids and starting them out early, and it shows 6 years later.
We also really worked hard on our Tier 1 for our reading instruction, and we changed it as well. So that's what we're hoping to see building stronger. And the hope is within 4 more years that we can wean off of possibly some of the
Right.
interventions because of our strengthening of our Tier 1 instruction. That's the goal.
Yeah.
Questions for Dr. Whitehead?
I just had an observation that I wanted to see if it was accurate. So, looking at the K through 2, that kindergarten class, even though it's just a mid-year assessment, I mean, their below average percentage is much less than what we're seeing in kindergarten, I mean, in 1st and 2nd grade. Is that typical, or is that just a high achieving class overall?
I would say that we're definitely seeing strengths in the Tier 1 instruction, but one of the reasons I don't necessarily provide a comparison on this one is that Ms. Littleton has done a lot of work with shoring up teachers' confidence and ability to administer the running records assessment, formative assessment piece.
Okay.
And so I think what you're seeing is accuracy building over time, and then the implementation of the workshop.
Yes, and phonics.
And phonics particularly,
We're really
in kindergarten.
We're strong with our phonics.
Okay.
Pre-K through 2nd grade.
And then the levels too. So the expectations for kindergarten, they're not as, I guess, as high maybe as you would see in some of the other grades as well. So
Okay.
if you look, a D is an expectation by the end of kindergarten. So, you know, it's A,
They've
B,
just
C,
got
D.
before,
So
yeah.
they're only 4 levels in by the end of kindergarten.
Mhm,
So
that's true. Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions? I do have a note at the top of my sheet that says introduce somebody, and I don't know how I waited this long, but I just wanted to wait around a little bit longer. But as you know, Don Lewis went to another district last semester, and we were very excited and happy to be able to get a new food nutrition director who's got a lot of experience and has already made a lot of great impressions, and that is Miss Shelley Daniels. So if you'll stand up and say hello.
I'm grateful for the opportunity to be here. Thank you so much. My family has moved here and we're settled in, and I've been 3 or 4 weeks now, and I've gotten around to all the schools and met all the managers. I'm very excited about the employees that I work with and the students that we serve. So you can find me out at GICA. If you have any questions, I'll be glad to answer them. Thank you. And I moved from Thomaston, Upson, about 4 hours away, and that's where my family is. Thank you.
Wonderful.
Well, welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for waiting around. I appreciate it. All right, our next area under the agenda is our supportive learning environment, which is where we usually start with the facilities update. Unfortunately, Mr. Boudreau has been under the weather. He's had pneumonia. He's kind of going around, been very sick since really somewhere point in the break, him and his wife. And Mr. Etheridge was going to assist me today as his fill-in, and his father unfortunately passed away last night. So please keep Mr. Etheridge and Al and his wife all in your thoughts and prayers. So it'll be me flying solo. I'm sure I'll lean on some others, but I think we'll get through this just fine. So we'll start off with our first area, which is Glynn Academy. Fencing, I think it's primarily done, right, John? So with your permission, we'll probably remove that item from the agenda next month under Glynn Academy. The science building,
Proceeding on schedule.
it's going around, it's going very well. The additional parking, we're still working through closing on those properties that we've talked about in executive session, so that is something that's still a continued focus for us as a district as well. I think that's it for Glynn Academy for now. Anything else?
City Lanier is not quite closed down. City Lanier in the science building, I processed the stadium building. I processed the stadium building pay request yesterday. We did get closeout documents, but Sidney Lanier is 100% complete. We're not releasing all the funds until we get all the warranties and guarantees.
Okay, thank you. Athletic fields, Ed O'Miller, anything that you want to say on that one?
Receiving proposals on.
I think those will be ready.
January the 14th.
That's right. So we'll have that for you at our next board meeting for that. New Burroughs Millette, I think we're pretty much ready, almost ready to kind of take this off and close out pretty soon.
That's great. I think Al has a few items that he's finishing up, landscaping and that kind of stuff.
We may keep it a month just for that closeout. Stadium, he just mentioned, I think we're ready to close that one out as well. We do have a credit from Burroughs Millette that I'll talk about under the proposed action items as well. But that, if you haven't been by there, they've got new sound panels. The grounds look great. The irrigation system's in. It looks fantastic. So if you get a chance, of course, that winter ride looks really nice this time of year anyway. But the gym looks great. I think they're very pleased with it. It just is a great facility. I mean, what a difference a year makes. We were all moving in just about a year ago, and so a lot of work has gone into making that a great facility over the last year, and appreciate all the support for that. Altama Elementary School. I think the only update is that all the footings and their drilling, I've gone by there.
The forward foundations, and they're continuing with the underground geothermal work.
I think it's going along very well. The next item we have is for the Center for the Arts. We're sort of in a, not necessarily a holding pattern, but I think the last time we updated you before the break, they got the Board of Regents approval from the college side. The college is sort of working behind the scenes on the intergovernmental agreement that will kind of kick off us working together. So once we get a kind of a draft from the college, from their law office, I guess, Mr. Lakin and I and all of them will meet and start kind of hammering out the nitty gritty and the details of that, and just trying to keep that momentum going into the new year. Certainly, I don't really have any other update on that unless somebody else does as well, but we'll certainly stay on that as we move forward into the new year. East Bloss 4, we were going to present a more itemized, well, it's kind of the same group, but I was going to put a little more specificity to each item, if you remember a couple of months ago, because we kind of want to do that every couple of months to kind of build on that layer, if you will. But with Mr. Boudreaux being out, we don't have that item, but we will present that to you in February with just a more itemized list of what each one of those projects looks like and what the extent is. And it kind of goes from most extensive to least extensive as you move down, being a replacement of Glendale, pretty big renovation at St. Simon's, and then you move down to our newer schools. There won't be as much work that needs to be done, but we'll present that in February. Compared to what I'm hearing from the other, it's a lot easier for us because we're working on ourselves, but I think we're well ahead of the schedule, so I feel comfortable doing that in February. So really things are going well from a facility standpoint, and we're very pleased with everything, and just appreciate anything, John, that you want to add on anything right now? I think everything's going well. Our next item is for Dr. Salmon for the Good Report.
You've got your 5-page report on your homelessness thing. Something that normally is, if you look at this page, we're seeing a lot more blue and green, which indicates the projects are complete. And also, there's 3 of the projects in white that talk about closeout or being closed out. So things are moving, progressing on schedule as we move along. As we look at page 2, you've got basically the contract information where each project stands financially. You can see in the color coding there, the yellow indicates it's completed. We've got 7 hidden projects that are completed, 2 more now that are completed, and next month we'll have 1 or 2 more of these that will move into that category. The roofs are complete, and that will move off of this sheet, as well as the wood gym before next month. Third page is the financial information regarding SPLOST. We're still doing fine. You've got a $1,700,000 budget that we're carrying through the end of this SPLOST. Your receipts for December were $1,945,000, so $245,000 to the good, and that's almost a little over $100,000 more than it was last year. You can see the pending receipts that you've got coming in. And, I'm always proud when this happens. The dollars at the bottom of this page match the dollars on the other page. Always love it when that happens. Sometimes because of rounding it down, I have to go back and find 37 cents. But you will look at the charts. You can see where your receipts are on the 4th page. You can see the middle line is last year's receipts. You can see the budget of the $75,400. So we've still got a very positive cash flow. We've got a very positive receipt scenario, and it looks like it will be through the rest of this project. A sheet that's getting smaller and smaller and will continue to. If you look at number 5, page 5, you'll see the SPLOST 2 projects. We're down to these, on that Greer Satilla Marsh, basically that one was closed out this month, so that will go away. Next month, stadium renovation and city veneers, John and Dr. Cole will eventually go away, and then we just got the design for the science building there. Andre and I have met both today and a good bit yesterday, looking at the SPLOST 2 closing. You've got those two projects left. You've got some State Department revenue that will be coming in next year, but basically we are showing a zero balance in that now, other than the funds that are remaining in Sidney Lanier and the work that we have on the stadium, and most of that are things that Al works with regarding the furniture, equipment, and some of that owner construction piece. So that one is moving along and basically closed. So there's your summary report. The 21-page report with the detail on each project will be on the website if it's not already. So that's on there every month, along with this one that you get here in the board meetings. That's what we are.
Thank you, Dr. Simon.
Thank you.
Good news. Okay, our next item is we do, I think, pretty much every January, we sort of look at a summary of attendance, whether it's staff or student, and discipline. So our first part of that is our student attendance, so I'll turn over to Ms. Haywood for that.
Thank you, Dr. Cole.
Thank you.
Good evening, Board of Education.
Good evening.
So, as Dr. Cole mentioned earlier, we provide you all with an update biannually in January and in June of our attendance, our student attendance. And so I want to make sure that I bring up the point again, the asterisk that you see in the cumulative enrollment column. That is based on cumulative enrollment. That is not the actual enrollment, but it's based on the number of students that have been enrolled within that school year. And so, to be quite frank with you, we see that attendance is just kind of attendance. We have, as a result of some concerns relative to student attendance, implemented some additional incentives since January 2019 to include, we've had many community members, including our superintendent, Dr. Cole, do some public service announcements. You might have heard them on the radios in the mornings, just as a reminder to parents about the importance of attendance. Our schools are utilizing their PBIS and also doing school level incentives. Outside of the office at many of your schools, you'll see where they have a percentage of students that are attending school that day. They also have within their buildings competitions between classes of who can have the largest number of students at school that day. Some of the other things, of course, one of the things that was done during the summer was the implementation of the high school exam exemption policy. And that again is based on students attending school. And we also have been providing updates and suggestions to our schools from our office using resources from Attendance Works. But if you look at our high school numbers, and I neglected to add this document from last year, but we see that our number of students who have 0 days has increased. In 2018, 0 days at Brunswick High was at 16.23%, and you'll see that this year it's at 20%. Glynn Academy was at 18% last year, and it's at 20% this year. So that suggests that students are coming to school. Also, if you look at 1 to 5, last year was 52.72 at Brunswick High. You'll see we're at 51.89. Also with Glynn Academy, 54.21 last year, and we still see about 54%, but the 6 to 9, last year, Brunswick High and Glynn Academy respectively were 15.53 and 14.43, and you'll see that they're both at 13% this year. So I think it would be safe to say that some of the incentives that we put in place, particularly that incentive, has helped significantly with our high school. So I'm curious to see what that will look like for next year as well. We have talked about the policy, and we have reached out to our student advisory groups and to other stakeholder groups to include parents to get feedback from them as well. So we'll continue to monitor that throughout the year to see if we need to make any adjustments or tweak anything with regard to that policy for our next school year. But I'm excited to see what it looks like cumulatively at the end of the year to see if we see a vast improvement. But I will say with the cumulative enrollment, those numbers have gone down a little bit, which to me suggests that perhaps our mobility is kind of selling out in some places. We don't see as many students moving from school to school. There'll be some schools where we'll have that transient population where those numbers will
continue to be as they are, but I would say that our students are relatively staying where they are enrolled, so.
And while I don't know that this, I'm sorry,
No, go
to say
ahead.
exactly represents it, but just like she said, I think the data's starting to show some change about, especially at the high school level.
Yes,
What's interesting, just anecdotally, talking to the principals, they think it's had a pretty big effect about just getting kids to want to come to school. I'm sure some of you that have high school students have seen that. And so I think it's starting to make a little bit of a difference, so.
I'm happy to answer any questions that you all may have.
Thank you so much.
Thank you all so much.
Thank you. Thank you. All right, our next item is discipline update, and obviously Dr. Poulos is not here, so Ms. Yakabachi and Dr. McKinnon have obviously graciously stepped in to this, and will present the data for our first semester. So I'll turn it over to you, Ms. Yakabachi.
I think Dr. McKinnon is starting.
Oh, sorry.
First. If you'll open up
Which one do you want to?
the DisPro, sorry. I don't come and talk about discipline, but I do come every year and talk to you about our disproportionality results. And this is a snapshot here of every December we receive our district determination of disproportionality from the data the year before. So every December before I go to break, I'm anxiously awaiting the results of that. And this year you can see the check mark is at the bottom, which basically says that we are not dispro in any of the areas that they monitor for us. It's a big celebration because there's a lot of work and effort that goes into trying to remain off of that list. And what it's saying is basically as we monitor the 3 areas, it's saying that one race is not at a higher risk than other races for being identified as a student with a disability or a student with a disability in a particular area, or a student with a disability placed in a more restrictive environment, and then the third one is a student with a disability in a certain race that is suspended or expelled more than any other race. So it's real important to us that we do look equitable in all of those areas in terms of race data there. So that was good news, and that is actually what the report looks like. And the next slide just shows you, and even though this is data derived from our students with disabilities, this is a district determination because it shows whether or not our administrators and our teachers are really implementing the policies, the procedures, and the practices that we've researched, that we've spent money on, that we've taught them, and it shows that it's paying off, that they are monitoring that along with us. And that's just a snapshot of the criteria in each one of those areas that the state looks at. It's pretty detailed. The top one talks about the certain areas that they look for in terms of special eligibility. And then the middle one is talking about the placement decisions. And you might remember that in December of 2016, we were found to be dispro in placement. We had far too many students, particularly our target population was Black or African American students, placed in separate settings, and that was, we were found dispro. And if we were found dispro in any of these areas, and when in the discipline category, there's actually a total of 5 different areas within that category. And if we're dispro in any one of them, then it means that we are determined to be dispro, and we must spend 15% of our grant money on the corrective action plan. So that year we were found dispro in placement, and that generated our creation of the ARC programs, and that program is a self-contained program for students with emotional and behavior disabilities, so that we wouldn't be placing too many of those students at Coastal Academy before they had an opportunity to have an intervention prior to that was more restrictive. And then the next slide basically is giving you an idea of what this means for us in comparison to the state. So 75 determinations were made by DOE. So 50 districts this year were determined, in the state of Georgia, were determined to be dispro and will be using, as I said, 15% of their grant funds for the corrective action. For us, that means about $400,000 or a little over. And so we certainly do use that money for things like flexible seating and professional learning for support services that we don't typically get to
do, or we would not get to do if we were found to be dispro. So we use it to to teach how to remain compliant and best practices in these areas. So when we were found dispro in December of 2016, I became director in February of 2017, and I was in charge of basically getting us off of that dispro list. And so I know what work goes into that. So it is extensive, but I will say it's just as extensive to try to remain off the list in some ways. But in the 3 areas that for our, where we are, our status in Glynn County right now, I will say that we are closely monitoring our identification of EBD students who are Black or African American. That's a crucial area for us that we could be dispro in next year if we don't really pay attention to that. And it's not to say that we are over-identifying Black students in the EBD category. It could also mean that we are under-identifying other races, and that one is getting more attention, and we should be referring some others. So we want to make sure that we're paying attention to who, where the needs really are. And then in placement, as I said, the ARC program, we are in good shape with that ratio number because of that, and so that's paying off for us. And in discipline, we have been able to monitor that better than we have before with USHA. The data we get from there, we're still working on that, but it does help us monitor it a little bit closer and not have to wait to December to find out what it is. So in order to remain compliant, I just wanted to provide for you a list of things that we will continue to do in hopes that we stay in good graces with the state in these areas. So, any questions?
Dr. McKenna.
Yes.
I know you've explained it to me, but explain it to the public that when, say we're disproportionate, and, because I get this comment a lot, well, if somebody is disciplined, they should be punished.
Right.
It doesn't matter what race or subgroup or economic status you are. Explain to me what we're talking about here as far as being disproportionate.
Yeah, I'm happy for the question,
Yeah.
actually, because we do a lot of training on what subjective and objective referrals are. If it's a fight, it's a fight.
Right.
If 2 students maybe, for example, are not getting along very well and they're causing some classroom disruption, we want that teacher to intervene. And it doesn't mean they don't get a consequence, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they don't. It doesn't necessarily mean that they need to get a referral to the office for an out-of-school or in-school suspension. That's what hurts us.
Right.
So what could be more effective in that situation maybe would be that teacher to say that someone that I paid for training to go through restorative practice, which is a proven research-based practice, they can sit down with those 2 students and work through their conflict, and in the hopes that there would be a better understanding of each other and work through that conflict and it not disrupt learning in the future for them or other students in the classroom. And that's more effective than an ISS or an OSS day. And for some of our students who want to be sent home and not be in the classroom to learn, we try other alternatives to that for that purpose as well.
So it's being consistent, but still on a case-by-case basis
Exactly.
based on the need of the student.
That's right.
Right.
That's right.
Okay.
Good question.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Thank you, Dr. McKenna. I think you just keep on scrolling down, right?
Yes,
Okay.
scrolling down, and we will look at first semester discipline data for 2019-20. About a year and a half ago, we started using a different program, a different platform, if you will, to help us with having different tools to analyze our office discipline data as opposed to just using Infinite Campus. So my recommendation for us this year, even prior to Dr. Poulos leaving us this semester, was to start compiling the board reports using the USHA data instead of the reporting from Infinite Campus. And the reason for that is because the data that's in USHA, the way that it is set up, is mirrored exactly like state reported data. Infinite Campus just includes all referrals, even if it's not a state reported offense. And state reported offenses are everything except for a behavior code that starts with other. So other things are like attendance related, a dress code violation, possession of unapproved items, or student incivility. And those are things that don't become a state reported offense unless they get a state reported consequence. So there's a slight difference. So it's that kind of thing of a kid went to the office and the assistant principal called the mom, addressed it, go back to class. So those are kind of low-level, minor things that the State Department does not track. But when we reported from Infinite Campus, all of those referrals were included in there. So what you're looking at this year shows just the state reported offenses there. And so you won't see until next year that comparison with the OSHA data from this year to last year. So usually we've done a 2-year comparison. But I did look at that information, and I will tell you that for elementary schools, we had only 2 schools that did have a slight increase in their referrals, and that was Golden Isles and Sterling Elementary School. If you look at middle school referrals, those were their total referral numbers for middle school. 166 at Glynn Middle, 267 Jane Macon, 292 Needwood, and 213 at Risley Middle School. Glynn Middle and Jane Macon, their overall referral numbers were down. There were increases for Needwood and for Risley Middle School. At the high school, Brunswick High's number was 725 and Glynn Academy was 406. And Glynn Academy's referrals were significantly down for this particular school year. And then you see the numbers for Glynn Learning Center as well. Then on the next slide, you will see the breakdown. These are by incident. So you can see what the numbers, how many referrals there were for each one of those categories at each school. And the next slide is probably with regards to PBIS implementation, the one that I get the most excited about. When we think about our behavioral strategies and interventions in teaching children, PBIS, teaching those school-wide and classroom expectations to all students is what we would refer to as our Tier 1. And for our Tier 1, we would expect to be able to meet the needs of at least 80% of our students. And so what the State Department considers Tier 1 for behavior is how many students, they want to know how many students and what percent of students have had 0 to 1 office discipline referral for the school year. So if you look at the green 2 columns, and if you combine those 2 columns, then we can say that more than 85% of students at every school have received 0 to 1 referral this school year. So the discipline issues that you do see are coming from a very small percentage of our student population. It's not pervasive across the board. And I think that helps sometimes when we reemphasize that with teachers. Whoever that kid is who's having that difficulty right there, that seems really, really huge. But if you look at it in the big picture, it's a small percentage of students who are having some significant issues. And we do continue to work to try to identify interventions and strategies and ways to support those students, and working with community partners and resources when those kids need things that, mental health things that might not be available in the public schools, but trying to work with those community partners to meet their needs as well. And communities and schools that we have been a tremendous support to our schools, and I think have contributed to overall success. The last page, the next slide, just shows our suspension data, which also comes from OSHA for first semester. So I think we can see from this that we are using in-school suspension at a higher rate than out-of-school suspension, which is a good thing that we are keeping the kids in school more. However, a school removal is a school removal and removal from class, and that's still a loss of instruction, whether they're at home or they're sitting in an ISS room. And when Dr. McKinnon is talking about how disproportionality is calculated 5 different ways for special education students, we are now deemed for ISS assignments, where several years ago we were not. So that is still something that we do continue to work with schools and explore other avenues. What are some other things that we can do as opposed to just a punitive consequence that generally does not change behavior. But that's it. That's all that I have. At some point, if you guys are interested, I would be glad to demonstrate and show you how our schools are able to use this new platform and how they're able to analyze their data with their PBIS teams. I don't know that we have time to do that this evening, but if anybody wants to see that at a future meeting or wants to meet with me one-on-one, or any of our team or anybody in the schools would be able to share that information with you, we'd be glad to do that. Any questions?
Thank you, Dr. McKenna. That's Dr. Butch. All right, our last item information is from our Executive Director of Personnel here, HR, is Ms. Bennett, about our staff attendance. Thank you.
Okay, so Chris, I'm going to ask you to go down to the second page. So this is the page that typically I share with you, so I wanted to make sure I included that again this year, so you would have a chance to look at information that's broken down just as the student attendance information is broken down. But I'm going to take us back to that first page, Chris. There, right. And the information at the top, I tried to color code it so that the 2019 information is sort of the tannish color, and then 2018 before that, well, actually 20, you can see fiscal years are up there, but the dates through December of 18 through December of 19. So to let you look at that, and then of course there's more detailed information on the other two pages. But what I wanted you to see this year is looking at, you still can see the breakdown of how many days per each school, but I wanted you to see our average, because I've really come to understand that we need to have some point of reference that we are kind of, looking at in relation to our performance, no matter what it is. So I have up there the average days that are absent for all of our elementary schools. Now granted, this is the information in the top is just the first semester, but I wanted you to see what our attendance rate is instead of looking at the number of days we miss necessarily. So that's the very top column, the box. And then the historical trend data. Dr. Whitehead is often sharing out with us information from the CCRPI. And part of the Climate Star rating is about attendance for teachers and administrators. So this gives us a point of reference. How do we look in comparison to the state average? And then what is the Glynn average? And then you can look at, we broke it down a little bit further than by sort of grade bands. So I thought that would be helpful. And remember, the bottom is a full year, because CCRPI is only going to report a full year. So,
When we're talking about absences, is that like sick or vacation, or does that include school-sponsored events, like, hey, we're going to Six Flags for the Beta Club or whatever?
What we report out is sick and personal days.
Okay.
Because we're looking basically at our teaching staff, and so they don't have vacation days. I know you're asking about sort of those other days.
Right.
But what we're putting out is just the sick and personal. So, and that kind of, thank you, Dr. Yergin, because that kind of jogged my memory to say, when we're looking at those average number of days absent, and I think for elementary it was 2.82 for right now. Remember, that also includes people who are out on approved long-term absences, like maternity or FMLA, and so that's all grouped in there when we're looking at that average number of days.
I thought it was neat just seeing, or a good idea to show the historical or kind of comparison, because it's always feel like you're just sort of out in the middle of nowhere, like, all right, how does this compare to anybody else in the state? So I thought it was good. I appreciate Ms. Bennett adding that. By and large, I think our teachers are here slightly more than it looks like the state average is, and so that's, good to hear. We certainly continue to work on this area, and we'll stress it as much as possible because we agree that this is one of the most important areas for us from a, just an achievement standpoint, is having our employees here, when they can. I just saw today we have the sickest state. Of course, it seems like everybody's sick right now in the nation. I don't know if it was something like that. Was that true? But we certainly have a lot of challenges with that going around in our schools. Anyway, any questions for Mrs. Bennett or I about those rates?
Can I just ask for a clarification? So, hold on, let me- okay. So in that top box with the blue and the
Yes.
tan or whatever those, the at least certified staff is allowed 3 personal days, is that right? So we don't really see any of those average days absent above that number of days that they're allowed?
Well, actually, Ms. Sam's personal days sort of come from sick days.
It's the same pot.
It's the same pot.
Okay.
Just means you don't have to provide a medical or doctor's note for that.
But we're not seeing where we give them 3 personal days and some sick days, and they're on average taking any more than the necessarily
That's
personal
correct.
days.
They're right at it, though.
Right.
They're right at it, but they're not.
That's any
there
job.
yet.
All right, thank you, Ms. Bennett.
Well,
Go
before,
ahead. Go ahead, sorry.
going back to the page, that's okay. In a leadership perspective, what to look at to me is when you have different schools that have a much higher percentage than the other ones. Then the first thing you look at is leadership. Is there an issue there? Is there other data that would support that we need to look at, Homestead School, whatever it may be,
Right.
that has an issue there. So this data can be telling in that when one has 4% and one has 27.
Right.
It's a significant difference.
And there's always a story behind the story. Some of those have 2 or 3 teachers that have a maternity or whatever. So we do monitor that when we see those kind of things. And as long as we can kind of justify and go, okay, yes, they've had one of those years where whatever, somebody's have a maternity or a long-term health issue, we certainly monitor that with our SSRs and things like that as well. So that's a good point. Anything else? All right, thank you, Ms. Bennett. I appreciate it. All right, our final area is our proposed action items. And as we do every January, the board will be asked on Tuesday to vote on our vision and mission statement. It has not changed from last year or the year before that, or probably the year before that, but it just reaffirms what we stand for and what our vision and mission is. That's a board, I think, probably maybe 4 years ago. I know maybe Mr. Allen and the college worked very hard and diligently on this. I think it's still appropriate and fits what we're trying to do here. So unless there's some changes that the board would like to make, we will have you sign this and vote on this again on Tuesday as a board. Any questions about that? All right, thank you. And then our next item is GBRIG, which is a policy we talked about last month. Mr. McKenzie did, and he had a kind of a tweak about the year, so I'll turn over to Mr. McKenzie.
Right. Well, actually, it was Dr. Pierce that presented it. We met with Mr. Vidal and the policy committee regarding the family medical leave policy and basically changing how we calculate the 12-month year from our policy currently has a rolling year to a fiscal year. And that was presented by Dr. Poulos at that time, and it's been in draft mode on the table for the last 30 days. So, any questions about that?
And the one thing you did mention that you haven't had any negative comments come from anybody.
No, there have been no negative comments, and a fiscal year would work better for us as a school district in how we calculate the eligibility for family medical leave.
Thank you for that.
And it's in highlighted right there, the change that we'll be doing. So this will be on our agenda for Tuesday as an item that for your vote and consideration for approval. Okay, thank you, Mr. McKenzie. Our next item is the review of our November financials. So I'll turn over to Ms. Preston for that.
Yep. So for the month of November, we didn't have any budget amendments that changed the overall revenues or expenditures to the general fund. There's plenty transactions between accounts, but nothing that changed the bottom line. The year-to-date revenues represent 67.7% of the budget. Our local tax receipts through November were for November were 43 million, and I looked at last year and we had collected 42 million in November, so a little bit ahead of schedule on that one. Year-to-date expenses represent 37.3% of the budget, and last year we were lagging a little bit behind. We were only at about 36. So we're more on target with our expenditures this year than last because we have positions that are filled. We don't have many vacancies this year. And as of November, we're almost 42% through the year. My East Plus information is older than the GOOD. So in the month of November, we received October sales tax receipts of $2 million. Those were 4% higher than the prior November, and as of year-to-date comparison, November to November, prior year to this year, we're up 4.46%. This financial report does reflect the lawsuit coming out of the beginning fund balance. So the fund balance we talked about earlier is generated from this report. The beginning of the year, we started with 15.4 because we deducted the 10.5 from that, and we'll projected ending the year at 12.7. Any questions?
Okay, thank you, Ms. Preston. Our next item is a review of a safety grant. And as you remember, Dr. Poulos over the last 2 or 3 months has been talking about the $30,000 that we got per school for the purpose of safety and security. One school that was sort of left out was the College and Career Academy, GICA. And it was because it was a kind of a special, if you've been in, most of you, if not all of you, I'm sure have gone in the entrance. It's a kind of unique entrance. It's got 2 different sizes. It's not just one wall going across like most schools we can kind of build. It's kind of what they call 2 storefronts. So it's a little bit more than a 30. It took a little bit longer to get that estimate, and so they separated it out. So we have so if you open that up, Chris, for us, this is a bid, same company. It's for more than the 30,000, but again, it's a little special situation with the 2 sides. But it is for the amount of $46,363 for that purpose. So this will be on for our vote on Tuesday. It is more obviously than 30,000. We're just using some of our excess money that we get from our East Bloss to pay for that, which we've done in some other schools as well. And so again, this will be for your consideration and approval on Tuesday for the approval for GICA to get a vestibule at their school started as well. Any questions about that project or what we're doing there?
I have one,
Yes,
but
ma'am.
it may be for Mr. Boudreau. So when you go into GICA, it's a huge lobby area. So I'm envisioning they've got to wall off
Correct.
the wings that
Kind of like a
branch
square
off
right there. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So it's essentially
Double.
more like 2.
Right.
Yeah.
It'll be right there when you come in the door. There'll be kind of like a box, I guess, and a waiting area right there behind it. So I've been told it's going to be very nice entrance for that school. But if you notice right now, you just walk in, there's just a little chair, a table set up right there with the secretary, taking people in the
Right,
school.
but with the open lobby
Exactly.
all behind
It won't be
it
that
and
way.
seating
Right.
area.
They'll
Okay.
have to be buzzed in to get in the rest of the school.
Okay, yeah.
Any other questions about that? All right, thank you very much, Chris. The next item is Burroughs Millette. I mentioned earlier that it's getting close to being a closeout situation. We do have a change order that has to always be voted on by you guys because of change in the budget, and that is a credit, which is nice. It's for $3,545.38. So it will be on our agenda for Tuesday to vote to receive this credit and this change order for your approval. Any questions about that? All right, that will be on our agenda on Tuesday. And our final proposed action item is for Jay Macon, and I'll let Dr. Whitehead talk about this one.
So you may recall a couple of months back, we had some technology purchase requests from some of our Striving Readers Grant schools. And Jay Macon was still working with their literacy team to determine what their needs may be for the year. So they have presented their requests for technology purchases that would be for 3 Chromebook carts, which would have 32 Chromebooks in each cart. The carts are the locking carts, and then the management software that goes along with Chromebooks. And so that request for purchase is included for your consideration for approval on Tuesday. And again, that's using your Striving Reader Grant funds.
Any questions for Dr. Whitehead on that item? I think that concludes all of our items for information as well as our proposed action items. Mr. Etchie.
Any questions of anyone? Thank you, Dr. Cole. Thanks, everyone, for all the work y'all put into these, everything that's on, all these reports we read. I know a lot goes into it, and we really appreciate the hard work. So it helps us get an idea of how everything's working. So thank you all very much. And this time, I guess we'll look for a motion to go into executive session. Do we have any legal, for legal and personnel? Can I get a motion?
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Mansell. And a second? Ms. Sams. All right, any further discussion about that? All right, well, let's, all in favor? All right. Thank you all very much. Please. motion to return to executive session.
Second.
All those in favor? Any discussion, I guess? There's no discussion of that. So all those in favor? No. Unanimous, Ms. Liptroth? All right, make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All right. Any
He
discussion?
made the motion.
Yeah,
He made the motion.
Oh, he's
I can make the motion. I can
He
speak
can
up.
second. I can third.
He's throwing executive
Power.
around. It's ridiculous.
Wait until a year from
My
now.
job, yeah, my job is to make this as quick as possible.
You're not right now.
I
It's
know.
supposed to call for the
All right, all
vote.
those in favor? Unanimous.
I didn't hear who
Tom.
made the motion.
Marcus
I'll
did
tell you
both of
about
them.
it.
I made the motion.
Tom Marcus.
Time is 6:49.
I did.
Jerry did.
That's
It just changed.
No.